Good morning, and thank you for your time here today. I want to tell you a little bit about my story. I'm a victim of
Ma'am,
illegal...
would you please state your name for the record and whom you represent, and then...
I'm sorry, my name is Laura Wilkerson, and I'm representing myself and my son Joshua here.
Okay.
I sent my son to school one day, and he didn't come home. He was due home about 12 o'clock. I couldn't get an answer from him, and just something, mother's instinct, God was telling me something's wrong here. I called the school. Was he there today? Yes, he was. I called, the police department. Were there any wrecks today? No, there weren't. I started just to look around town, and it took me probably about an hour or so. And it happened by a strip center, and I happened to look over to my left and see his truck parked there. I turned in, and the truck looked different to me. It had some tall grass seeds in it and some sticks underneath the frame. We called police to the area. They came. In about 15 or 20 minutes, they asked me to come over to a dumpster that was parked beside it, and they slid that dumpster door open. And they said, "Mom, are these his things?" And I said, yes, it was his backpack and his shoes. We stood there for a couple more hours wondering if my kid was in that dumpster. Eventually, they decided to take Joshua's truck for evidence. I didn't realize what was going on behind the scenes, but they had arrested someone in that parking lot. They came to my house about 3 a.m. and told me that they had a suspect in custody and that they wanted me out to another parking lot the following morning about 6 a.m., that Texas EchoSearch was going to look for Josh and help to find him. They told me at that time they thought he'd been hurt and then he needed help. The next morning at 6, we went to that parking lot, and we stayed all day long searching for him. About 8 o'clock, we just couldn't stand up anymore, and we went home. Detectives came back to my house, and they knocked on the door, and they came in, and I just said, "You found him?" And they said, "Yes, ma'am, we did." I said, "What did he look like?" And they didn't answer my question. What we didn't know then was he was murdered by a child brought here when he was 10 from Belize. The next day, the detectives asked us to the station because they wanted to gently tell me before the news media hit that Josh was tortured and beaten and strangled. I asked at that time, where are his parents? From a mom's heart, I was more concerned about that kid because it hadn't settled on me yet that Josh was gone. And I remember the detective looking at me and saying, "We can't ask him." And I thought...
Go ahead and finish, ma'am.
Thank you. I thought, you can't ask him. It just seems so unreal to me. You can ask me any question, any officer, any time of day, and I have to answer it. Anyway, 2 years later, we finally went to trial. As the trial opened, I saw a little video of them going out through a field, and you finally saw a clearing, and there was Josh. He was 18 and a half. He weighed 100 pounds in the body bag. When you first saw him, his school shirt was pulled up over his head. He was charred. He didn't have shoes on. His hands, his neck, his hands and feet were tied behind his back. He was in a fetal position laying in the field. The murderer said from the stand that he hit Josh in the nose so hard he wanted to blind him so Josh couldn't fight back. He kicked Josh next in the stomach so hard it ruptured his spleen and liver. Josh tried to get up, so the murderer said if he would just quit getting up, I was stopped. He beat him in the head with a closet rod so hard it broke in 4 pieces. He tied Josh up after bloody bubbles kept coming from his nose, and so the murderer realized he was dead. He tied him up, put him in Joshua's truck, drove around, took $2 out of Josh's wallet, bought gasoline, put him in the field, and set him on fire. I tell you, as a mom, to sit through something like this is incredible. It's every mother's worst nightmare. The killer was actually pretty proud of what he did. As he said, his culture was very different. His killing skills took over, and he just couldn't stop from killing Josh. I tell you, to sit in there and to see something like that was absolutely My family is broken forever. Josh is gone. He's home. He's with the Lord. He doesn't hurt anymore. It's the ones of us left behind to deal with this. You know, I've heard so much today about economy. My family has suffered. We have a small business, and it's probably dropped 60% since Josh died because we really had to relearn how to breathe and function again. It's just forever changed our families. I want so much to just be allowed to enforce the current laws. You know, I don't want to trample on anybody's rights, but I'm tired of not feeling that Joshua had any rights here. You know, the second he was murdered, it was all about the killer's rights. And it's just broken my family. You know, I stayed home mom because I raised my children to honor God, to love Him, to obey laws, all laws, not which ones they thought were fair, but all the laws of the state. And I wouldn't go back and change it again. I'm not about to raise a kid or a grandkid and say, you know, just whatever you feel like doing. We have to allow our officers the right to ask if they're investigating something, to further ask their immigration status. How are they going to know? They ask me for an ID anytime they stop me. Rightfully so, I give it. How are they going to find out who people are if they can't show that ID, if they can't ask them further and further what to do or where they're from? To me, it doesn't seem, you know, I'd give anything in this world if Josh was back detained 5 minutes on the side of the highway by a policeman asking him questions.
Mrs. Wilkerson, are you up to questions from the committee of Senator Lucio?
I want to offer my heartfelt sympathy to you, ma'am. The very bottom of my heart. There's some bad people in this world. Bad people sometimes that hurt their own countrymen where they come from. This weekend, I was also saddened to hear a story of a young mother with a child in her arms who was fleeing from Central America because of being prosecuted there in harm's way, and the person bringing her over, along with some others, took her baby to take care of her while she ran through the bush. She turned around and he was gone, never to see her baby again, ever. There's some sad stories like yours is devastating, obviously. The idea of losing a son, a daughter, a father, a mother, it's just devastating. And I truly, in my heart, share with your grief, and I won't forget your testimony. And we try to do right to help those who are being wronged. And I don't think there's anyone serving with me in the legislature that doesn't want to bring justice and not want to see laws that protect a child like yours and the families that live in this state, in this country. It's just a very hard situation. But I personally thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Can I have just a brief response?
Sure.
Joshua's murder was in court 6 months before he killed Josh on a harassment charge of his ex-girlfriend. He was not identified as illegal. He posted a bond, I think, of $50 and was allowed out. He was about to have to face those consequences in court. And I think that's ultimately what he killed Josh for, because he wanted to scrap his truck for money. Had he been detained, or had it been notified and detained at that point, my kid would be here today. He would be here today. You know, if Josh was back, he'd be the first one to say, I forgive this kid. I forgive him because that's who I raised him to be.
Yes.
And he would forgive it, and I have forgiven him. But I'm not going to forget what he did to my Josh. I can't.
Yes,
May I also, Mrs. Wilkinson, express our deep grief for the loss of your son. I think one of the things that the citizens of this state and this nation that have similar stories of something tragic are frustrated that as Pastor said, in Scripture telling us to be kind to the stranger, Scripture doesn't absolve the stranger of obeying the law in the first place.
That's right.
And seeing the justice as our Bill of Rights requires it carried out, you're right, it's difficult that when charged with a crime, the rights of the person charged we want to protect. I think the reason we're here discussing this is because of the circumstances of many, many families that share your situation. So, Senator Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Wilkerson, I too want to thank you, and you do have our prayers for you and others that have gone through this same thing, and I hope as we go through this, we don't lose sight of the fact that this is what we're talking about with this law. It's not about somebody's preconceived ideas of what might happen to a part of the economy, which may or may not happen. It's pure speculation, but these are real. And I hope we just don't lose sight of this is what it's all about. And we thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Members, other questions?